All right, folks at home, the class is doing the yearbook survey on food. If you want to do it, you can go onto the email we got and click a link and do it. I'm recording. It is, in fact, one of your classmates this time who's out.
Hi, absent person. What was it?
Anna's out, right? We'll see if I get any more notices of anyone being out. And once again, I'm so sorry, but the record button didn't show up, so you don't get to see our happy faces. You only get to see our screen.
Yay.
All right. You got mochi? That's the best. You want to pick up the others of them?
Can I pick them up? No, got it.
Oh, I should have asked. All right, if you guys will look at the board, you will see. Yes, I know. Okay, Ben, if they aren't finished, just sit down and turn in whatever they have. All right, if you'll look at the board, you'll see the homework. This is a reminder, if you have any paragraphs, turn them in. All right, that's enough. This is not working. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Madam. Look at the lessons that you're reading.
How does this survey? Oh, that's a lot of notes.
It is not a lot of note cards. In fact, if you were to count them and you divide it in half, you would find it's not very many note cards.
Oh, I would do that at the same time.
Yeah. So this one, though, this is probably two lessons where if you wanted to set aside a large chunk to do history, you could do these two together because it's the Pilgrims and Squanto. So they fit together perfectly well. I mean, you can split them up too. Squanto has fewer questions, just a few at the bottom, and more of them are from lesson 59 about the Pilgrims. So that's kind of up to you how you do the work, but do that and be prepared for a reading quiz. Be prepared for a reading quiz on Monday.
You let us use your notebooks like the first time, yeah.
I know, at the first part of the year.
Come on, I'm only a 7th grader.
All right, you are a 7th grader, period, is the real thing. Also, go over Sonnet 116 a few times. Just keep yourself moving on that. We're getting close to the end of the Sonnet 116 preparation. I think you'll enjoy the lesson on Squanto. I was reading it last night, and it struck me how interesting it is to read Squanto's story from his own perspective. Not his own perspective, but from the perspective of his life, rather than reading his story embedded into the Pilgrims' story, but to actually just take him as a person and to read his whole story together gives a bit of a different flavor to the story of Squanto. So I think you'll enjoy that. I think you'll learn some new stuff. Again, there aren't a lot of note cards on Squanto, but that's just because it's just a lot of really interesting story about his life. And the rest of the note cards are on the Pilgrims, the Puritans, the Separatists, the Pilgrims. Who settled? Somebody raise your hand and tell me, where did the Pilgrims land and settle life? Where did you say? No. That's where they didn't. This is why I want you to separate this in your brain. Yeah, it was close to Boston. They were aiming for Virginia. Like, they thought they were going to come to Virginia, but they got blown off course, and they ended up in Boston. And if we say the name, you guys are going to recognize it.
Is it Plymouth Colony?
Yes, it was Plymouth. They landed on Plymouth Rock. It's Plymouth Colony. That's near Boston. And the reason they had to sign the Mayflower Compact and do all of that is because they were starting a whole new government because they weren't in Virginia. Since they weren't in Virginia, they had no laws. They had no government. They had no nothing. And they had to sort of start it all again themselves. And that's why. So the Pilgrims who landed in Plymouth, a lot of them were escaping religious persecution, looking to start a new life. Were the people who landed in Jamestown escaping religious persecution and looking to start a new life? No. What were they doing?
Looking for finding gold.
They wanted gold. They were looking for money. They were looking for ways to make money. Yeah. All right. So that's the difference. And I think that if you separate out those things in your brain, you will have gotten somewhere helpful with these lessons. If you could cut the lights, I'm going to tell you for our Black History Month and prayer time, I'm going to tell you about a woman named Sojourner Truth. Isn't that a pretty cool name? Do you like that? Would you like to get to make up your own name and come up with a name like Sojourner Truth?
What's Sojourner?
No. Sojourner is like a traveler, a pilgrim. It'd be like calling yourself Pilgrim Truth. It comes out of a verse in Hebrews that said that we're strangers, we're aliens, we're not of this world. We're like pilgrims wandering in the world. This isn't our home. So she was saying this world isn't my home, and I care about the truth. Kind of putting together these two ideas in a name she took for herself. So let me tell you about Sojourner Truth. You can look at a portrait of her, and you can look at a mural of her as well.
Where's the mural?
I don't know where it is, actually. Yeah. So she was born a slave to parents who were also slaves. And I'm not going to draw out her entire childhood story, but if you've ever read about the life of a slave, the bad version of that was her story. Pretty much all the bad stuff that you've ever read about happened to her. She had a rough childhood, a rough life, separated from her family. You know, her own family was separated from her. And at some point in her adult life, she walked away from being a slave. She didn't escape through the Underground Railroad, but she just found herself in a position where she was able to walk and then to get to a territory where she was free. And she remained a free woman for the rest of her life. Yes, Ava?
I heard until recently, and I was really confused. Like, the Underground Railroad isn't underground or a railroad.
Yes.
So then why is it an Underground Railroad? I
Like
thought it was actually
underground meaning like
Yeah,
stealthy.
Yeah, I thought it was
sneaky.
underground too.
What about railroad?
Because it was like a path that connected from one house to another house, and they were all these safe houses, and so it was like if you were going to say it, you'd be like stealthy, invisible railroad would be another way of saying Underground Railroad. It wasn't really a railroad, it was invisible, but there were tracks that went from one to the other, and only the people that were part of the Underground Railroad knew the next place to send you. Even information was hidden from people, kind of like a spy movie, honestly. The people themselves knew only what they needed to know, and they tended to have secret walls, secret basements. They would hide people. They had plans for how you hid people, kind of Nazi-like. If the hunters came looking for the escaped slaves. The Underground Railroad is a really neat, really cool thing to read about. Recommended. All right, so after she walked away from being a slave, she found a job working for some people who were evangelists. And so she started helping them. She wasn't a Christian at the time. And while she was working for them, she became a Christian, and she discovered that God was in the business of liberating people. That this is what he cared about. Spiritual freedom and freedom, physical freedom. So this became a theme of her life. She renamed herself, as sometimes people do after they have been born again, but particularly since her name was a name that was given to her by slaveholders anyway, she renamed herself to give herself kind of this new identity and started traveling and preaching. So just pause for a moment and think about this. This is the early 1800s. She is a woman. She is a black woman, and she is a preacher. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? Breaking a lot of social norms here. Yes, Lila.
For a long time.
What was her original name?
It started with an M. Miranda, I think. It was a name that had been given to her, not by her parents.
She like 86 when she died.
That's right. She was. She was nice. She was very old. So she was what became a theme for her. She started off traveling, preaching the gospel. She would talk a lot about freedom, and then as she continued to grow, it started morphing around wanting to also be politically active. And her politics got shaped because of two things. One was the women's suffrage movement, people who were trying to get women the right to vote. And the other one was the fact that the Civil War was impending. So she saw the Civil War as a very simple issue of freeing slaves. She desperately wanted other slaves to be freed, and so she spent a lot of her energy recruiting soldiers to fight in the Civil War and trying to make a case for black soldiers being allowed to fight in the Civil War, which in itself was not even easy to get people to agree to. She was involved for a while with the women's suffrage movement. That's Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, but she fell out with them over the issue that they said, we will not accept black people getting the right to vote unless women also get the right to vote. She said, I'll take any victory. I think it's fine if black people get the right to vote, and we'll keep working on women getting the right to vote. And this, because women were the most important thing to Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and to her, it was just as important for black people to get the right to vote. They ended up parting ways, but they were politically active for a long time together. I saw a hand. Who had a hand up?
Oh, I did. I was just wondering, it seems kind of silly for the people who are trying to free slaves, win a war with free slaves won't let black people fight.
Yeah, so let's take away the word silly and say complicated. Even though it is true that that in the Civil War, the issue of slavery was a very major issue that was being thought about and decided. The North had their own version of racial bias and prejudice and looking down on black people and not seeing them as equal. It wasn't as if north of this particular line, everybody saw things right, and south, people didn't see things right at all. It wasn't like that. It was very complicated. So even on the north side, even when you would think, why wouldn't you just take soldiers? There was distrust of people, black men, who wanted to fight because there was racial bias and distrust in general of black people. Even among the people who kind of maybe would have said, we're going to go teach those Southerners a lesson because they believe in slavery. And yet they had their own version of, we don't actually believe in equality. We think that black people shouldn't get paid the same amount. We don't think they should have the same kind of jobs. You know, even if it wasn't explicit like separate facilities, it was still other versions that were problematic. That's what makes that, when we get to that, which is next year, that's what makes the study of the Civil War so complex and so interesting, and the study of what happened after the Civil War too. Lila?
So two things. One, it kind of seems like interesting to me because she was saying that she wants black people to be able to vote.
Yes.
And there are black women, so if black people were able to vote, then black women would be able to vote too.
Well, they would have, because remember, the first vote belonged to white men who were land owners. It was very specific. It wasn't even like all white men could vote. White men who owned property. Because the idea was that only those who were intelligent and educated should vote. And this, that's part of an entire conversation. And when we talk about women's suffrage again next year, that is really, again, the interesting conversation is the voting was looked at really differently than how we think of voting. And it's connected to, even when people were given the right to vote, sometimes they would start to put tests on Well, let's make sure you're educated enough to vote. We don't want dumb people voting who don't understand the issues. But then on top of that, they started taking an idea that's maybe valid to say you should be educated in order to vote, and they took that and they started writing up exceedingly hard tests like that were only given to black people and just to keep them from voting.
Oh, okay.
Like, okay, a white person gets like some super easy question. All right, now you can vote. A black person is like, please name all 60 judges that are on the circuit court in the county of Henrico. And if you can't name them all, then you can't vote. Yeah, crazy stuff like that.
Maybe a way to solve that would be just to make sure everyone's educated and not just a certain amount of people.
There you go, Ava. I think it's a good idea.
So I was watching a movie called Lincoln, and in the movie it was like based on the Civil War, and he was trying to get some Southerners to like vote too, because not all the Republicans in his party, like he was saying like that not all the Republicans in his like party would vote for equal rights or something. So he had to get like a certain amount of votes from the Democrats.
Yes.
And one thing that they did was they put like the senator, I think, in like the court, like the Democratic court, and like pretended like they were Democrats, and those two wasn't like supporting it because they could tell by the way they were sitting there. They were like kind of doing it. So I thought it didn't think of what I was saying. Like,
You see how tricky and how complicated it is. And Lincoln himself wasn't even wasn't supportive of equality in the way that we see it. His wife and all of her brothers, his wife was a Southerner, all of her brothers fought for the Confederates. I mean, like, he was edgy for his time, but he was not for equality in the way that we understand it today. So it's all super interesting.
yeah.
So her political work was a direct outcome of her religious awakening. You see these pictures of her. I wanted to read you this one quote just because I thought it was funny, and also you can hear her voice in it a little bit. She said, "That little man in black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman." Well, where did your Christ come from? Where did Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with it. No, and you get her point? Yeah, Jesus himself didn't have a earthly father. So why are you saying you have to be a man? And because that's Jesus. So anyway, she was quite a character, as you can imagine. And in honor of Sojourner Truth, we are going to do for our prayer, we're going to use the Bible for prayer. And I want 5 volunteers. There's 5 short verses. I'll give you a number, and you guys are going to read this. 1, Lila. 2, Blythe. 3, Ben. 4, Chris. And is there anyone else who wants to do this one besides people who have already raised their hand? 5, Lily. All right, can you 5 stand up, please? And y'all are going to be the ones who read for us in that order that I said it.
I was 3, right?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Out of my distress, I called on the Lord. The Lord answered me and set me free.
Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom.
For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free in Christ Jesus from the law of sin and death.
Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone, love your brother, but fear God, honor the anytime. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Amen. All those verses are awesome about freedom. All right, a quick plug for 2 days from now, we have our field trip. Did anybody else have your mom send in money to me? Cash or check?
I don't know, but I'm gonna.
Don't worry if most people have Venmo'd me, but some people just said they were going to send something in. Okay, so yeah, you can ask if you need to, but she might have already sent it in. I can't remember. I've been talking to Mr. Bannister working on his very complicated presentation with lots of instruments and slides and music and all sorts of things. And we are going to get that all set up tomorrow, and then set up again on Friday, and it's going to be great.
Why are you setting it up 2 days?
Because he wants to make sure that there aren't technological glitches. There's a lot of different moving pieces to this, and sound, and audiovisual and all that.
If you need me to help, I can help.
Oh yeah.
Technology.
So here's the thing I was gonna add right here. If it's gonna be a nice day on Friday, never a bad idea, since we're finishing at noon, never a bad idea to pack a lunch. And where there definitely are facilities around the church, you could go sit on the front steps of the church, and there's places right around that you could just sit out and eat a lunch. But the church building is also really close to Forest Hill Park, which is a lovely park with amazing trails. And even if you have little siblings, there's a really good kids playground at Forest Hill Park. So you might keep that in mind as a thing to do, a place to go. And maybe I'll send out a note to the people who have signed up, or to everybody, and say that. But you guys keep that in mind, like, hey, Mom, I'll help you pack the lunch, and then let's have a picnic afterwards, because it would be a fun thing to do. Okay, we're adding 2 lines, and then we're going to practice this. The 2 lines are these 2 right here. Look how close we are to the end.
Are you gonna say it 50 times again?
No, because they're not as complicated. Let me read it to you, and you'll hear how they're so much simpler than before. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. Okay, you guys already know what the word alters mean. Alters means to change. So love alters not with his. Look up above. Who is his? Look directly above. 2 lines above.
The killer.
The last time that there was, see, his is right here. His time. It's talking about time. Yes, you did. So this is how you draw the lines. So we're still talking about time. And you know that it's about time because look what it's saying about time. Brief hours and weeks. Of course that's time. How does time make us feel about time? It's always passing, right? It's not, everything's so short. How did that happen? It was so fast. Brief hours and weeks. Life is full of brief hours and weeks. So love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out, even to the edge of doom. What is the edge of doom for time?
The edge of a video game.
Nope. What's the doom of time? Death. So basically, love doesn't change when time passes and sticks it out to death. It's the same thing that all the pop songs say, the same thing that all the books say, and yet it's Shakespearean and it's way cooler in the way he says it.
Not all pop stars.
Well, not all of them say that it would last till death. Some of them bemoan how easily and quickly people give up on so-called love. All right, so let's say these 2 lines 5 times through. Try to get your mouth used to saying the words together, and then we'll add it in with up from the top. All right, ready? Just these 2 lines. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. 2 more. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. 1 more. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. Actually, can you turn the lights on? Before we do the whole thing, let's do it with, from here. Let's do these 4 lines together. because that'll help us to put it together since it's all about the same idea. Ready? Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. One more time with those 4 lines. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. All right, stand up. You can face the front if you need to. If you're already feeling confident, you can look back at your classmates. But we probably need to do one more facing forward. From the top all the way through what we've covered. Let's go. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark. It looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering mark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. All right, you guys were great on that. Can you face in toward each other and try to say it to each other instead of to the board? Anyway, to anybody in class. Ready? Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. All right, that's good. You guys are doing great. We just have 2 lines to add on Monday. Then we'll review again on Wednesday, and then you guys will be reciting it.
Wait, what do you mean reciting it?
You're reciting it. You're all gonna take your turn. You're gonna stand up and you're gonna recite it
Wait, in front of-
alone.
What?
Will we have
Wait,
that?
what? That's not.
No,
Wait, in front of
you're supposed to memorize it. That's the point.
But I need that to memorize.
Yeah, me too.
Why do you have to memorize
This is
it?
why I keep putting it on the homework. This is your presentation. This is your. What did we learn last year?
So mom.
I remember.
that prayer, what was it?
Yes.
The apostles'
Wait,
Creed.
how much do
Right.
we get paid for this?
What?
You get a grade.
I
It's a
meant to
project
say
grade.
I didn't say paid. Yeah.
You want a 0 on a project?
I didn't mean to say paid.
You'll be
Last time
fine.
I did something for Miss Rova. I meant to say grade.
No, you'll be fine. I'll prompt you if you need help. That's why we're going over it so many times. All right, let's get out our note cards. Get your note cards. Have your note cards. I'm gonna have Lily answer this question, and then we're gonna not yet. We're gonna talk briefly about why. Not yet. Why the 30? No, you can sit down. Why the 30 Years' War matters. So we need to talk about why we're even studying this, so you get the big idea, which is the main thing I want to stick with you. So that is what we're gonna do. So Lily, first tell us, what was this one of the last major wars between Protestants and Catholics in Europe? 30 Years' War. This wasn't the absolute last time the Catholics and Protestants fought, because there was Ireland, and there was some Catholic Protestant fighting that happened in Ireland that was significant. But this is the last major war. Okay. Why does this matter?
Because
So, first of all, the Reformation's been around for about
52 years.
150 years by this point. And ever since the Reformation happened, haven't we been hearing things about how the Protestants and Catholics are fighting with each other?
I can't imagine.
Not just fighting with each other, like taking out swords and going at each other and killing each other.
Yes.
This has been happening for 150 years of history. And guess what? It essentially ends here. There's a reason for this. There's a reason it started, and then there's a reason that it ended. Yes, Ava.
She is.
Yeah,
Just
I
drink
guess
the
so.
water
But you're missing the rest of it is note cards. This is the point.
Ava, drink your water.
Hold your breath. And then swallow while you're holding your breath.
How do you do that?
Is it- And then make yourself swallow while you're holding your breath.
Or
Try that.
Like this.
Or just hold on to it. You don't have to keep holding your breath.
It's like this.
Bless you.
Hold on till after I make this most important point. Our idea, this is something that we think is normal during this period of history, is that there are Catholic countries and there are Protestant countries. But that did not become normal until after the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. This was at the end of yet another Catholic Protestant fighting thing. They came up with something that was called, this is Latin, Cuius Regno Eius Religia. And it says, in essence, whoever is reigning, whoever's the king or queen, gets to set the religion. Whoever the king or queen is gets to set the religion. So if Elizabeth is the Queen of England, England is
Catholic.
and if Mary is the queen, England is
Catholic.
And it was like that in every European country. These countries are really small and close to each other. And it was like that from country to country to country.
Well, we want war.
And so they would fight, or they would assassinate each other,
Yeah.
or they would position each other to get into positions, and people would scheme to get other people to be the king or queen, because that reshaped the entire religion of the country. But after the 30 Years' War, at the end of the 30 Years' War, the agreement at the Peace of Westphalia was, listen, you've stayed all this time just to hear this one thing. After the 30 Years' War, at the Peace of Westphalia, at the end, they decided no more. It's not going to be the religion of the ruler that sets it for
Amen.
everybody else. And we know this because Cardinal Richelieu was what religion? Catholic. And he supported the Protestants. And
That's so weird.
by the end, everything started getting mixed up. Go ahead and get water now.
Turn it upside down.
Why are you taking
I
your mouth
accidentally
quick?
took this. 'Cause I thought it was
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was the end of that. And that is why after the 30 Years' War, there aren't any more major wars that are about religion. Because countries stopped organizing themselves where the religion was connected to the ruler, and they stopped fighting about it. It was the agreement at the end of this horrible war that killed probably 11 million people.
Jeez.
And they were killed through battle, but also through starvation, and how some people just die because of plagues, things like that get passed around. So that is the main idea, the main point. We're not going to, well, maybe we'll get to this again. Okay. Now you can turn off the lights. Because, Lila, do you have your note cards?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what event started 30 Years' War? This was an event where two Catholic governors were thrown out of a window by the Protestants in the city?
Oh, the demonstration of
Exactly. The defenestration of Prague. Have any of you in this room ever studied Latin? Okay. So if I cover up the D and I cover up the end of the word, what is that word in the middle? Fenestra.
Fenestra.
Fenestra is what?
Fenestra.
I have no idea. I'm not that good.
Fenestra means
I'm gonna guess. It's throwing out the. It's throwing.
Well, it's not throwing.
No, it's
It's throw out the window.
Does anybody? Does anybody?
I took mine
Window. It's window.
See, I'm so
Fenestra is window.
What's easy?
So if you fenestra somebody, you're
You remove her.
Out the window.
out the window. Out the window.
Get out the window.
Defenestra. So the defenestra, you missed our Latin lesson, Ava. I'm sorry. Fenestra is a window. To defenestrate someone is to throw them out the window. And I think this is so memorable, and people love painting portraits of this because it's kind of funny. And it's a really cool word. The defenestration of Prague. Yes.
Do you have any pictures of someone who's trying out the window?
Oh, yes. Of course. Isn't that what you wanted to see? So this is one of the famous portraits of the defenestration of Prague.
Well, didn't
I
they
would.
all survive?
Okay. Here's my thing.
They fell about 7 stories.
I have to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they survived.
They survived, right?
Because of manure.
Because of angels.
Oh, wait, they survived?
Or because of manure, depending on what your storyline is. I saw that your hand was up, and you don't have to say, I have something to say, because I'll call on you when I have a moment. Yes, Lila.
Okay, so here's the thing. I would never, ever want to be in the world because whenever like I do something wrong or something that I do is wrong, I get this like really bad guilty feeling in my stomach, and I hate it so much.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I read this part of the like lesson, and I like learned that they like push them off. After like if I were to do that in the moment, I'd be like, yes, let's do it. And then after, I would like feel like bad all day,
Oh,
like
yeah.
no matter what. And so I just think to myself, I'm like, why would people do this? Like that, it's not worth that.
Right. You'd probably be glad that they survived.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
Imagine falling out of the window.
I know.
7 stories,
Just
and
the way
then
that
surviving.
Imagine.
But you know, this was not the first. Did your book tell you this is the second time in Prague? Not the second time in the world, the second time in the same city that people had been defenestrated.
Yeah, the frog idiot just masking people.
In Prague, they just threw people out of windows. You know that people still get thrown out of windows sometimes.
In Prague?
No, not in Prague. I don't think in Prague. But there have been other occasions where there have been so-called suicides in Russian-run countries that people are pretty sure somebody just got tossed out a window, and their secret service called it.
If it's Russian, you know the answer.
It might have been. All right, so this is not the only picture. They get more girls. Stop. Girls. You're talking, not only does it show up on the recording, but it makes it hard for the person at home to even understand what we're saying.
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
Don't explain. Just they get more cartoonish. Here's another one.
What? Oh my gosh.
That one looks not as bad.
And here's one
That
that's
looks
even.
amazing.
You like that one?
That one doesn't look
That
as
guy's
bad.
face, though.
So colorful.
That one doesn't look
Here's one where it looks like he's falling about less than one story.
How
No,
did
let's
fell
see,
out?
How did he die? He wasn't falling into bees.
But he's falling under rocks
He's
here.
going onto his
It
neck,
looks like-
Brady.
That looks like somebody threw that.
Right. And then there's always this one.
Hey, Doofenshmirtz!
What?
That seems like something Doofenshmirtz.
It does seem like something you would say.
I don't think it's funny. I
What?
just think it's funny.
Who is that?
It's Doofenshmirtz, Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Phineas and Ferb. I haven't seen it in a while. That's the only reason I
Yes, Phineas and Ferb
I'm a
needs to
big
be
Disney-
revived.
The meme.
It's a good one.
Dr.
I never watched Phineas and Ferb. That show is
You
awesome.
should revive it in the summertime. It's a good summertime show. All right, so moving on to the next one, and I want to point out that you are going to get to see some really amazingly lovely portraits of these men who show up.
Oh no.
He is a very pretty man. I think.
That mustache? Yeah, let's rank.
Hello, it's Liam.
This all right, hold on, guys. This portrait is not of Ferdinand. This portrait is the answer. So, Audrey, can you tell us what did the Protestants of Bohemia do when they were so unhappy with the policies of their King Ferdinand?
They
The
took
Protestants.
him out.
They deposed him?
And then they elected the new guy.
Yes, and do you have his name? If not, you'll want to add his name. Frederick. Another F. So they deposed the king, correct your heart if you need to, and they elected a new one named Frederick, who was a Calvinist. Now, this is like quite a bit of a side note, but you know how we keep talking about the Catholics and the Protestants? And we know that there were Lutherans in Germany, and we know that in England they weren't called Lutherans. What were they called? The Protestants were called Anglican. But guys, there were also Calvinists because John Calvin was in what place? Sweden. Switzerland. Geneva, Switzerland. So listen here. Calvinism was also growing, but you would think Calvinism and Lutheranism would be kind of the same thing, but they weren't. They had disagreed about an issue related to communion. Did the bread and the wine really become Jesus' body and blood or not? Lutherans were more like the Catholics. Calvinists were less like them. So they weren't even in this together. So the Calvinists were even more persecuted, even by the Lutherans. The Lutherans weren't fans of the Calvinists. That is why a lot of the people who came to United States, who came to America in the New World were Calvinists. They were like the lowest rung of religion because they weren't even liked by other Protestants. So a lot of them were in the separatist group that came to the New World. The Calvinists were. And it shouldn't surprise us that we see a strong strain of Calvinism in Virginia, actually, because that's a lot of the heritage of those who came to settle in Virginia. Isn't that interesting? I learned that last night and this morning. I have a friend who's a professor at of a Bible college, and I sent him my question, and he just answered. So I just was reading it. All right, so this is Frederick. He was a Calvinist.
Hi, Frederick.
And this one is Ferdinand. Do we like his beard?
No.
Oh my gosh.
Very,
Oh.
it's very
Oh
short.
my
Is
gosh.
that neck brace?
Oh, it's just like Queen Elizabeth's, isn't it?
Why is he wearing that?
I think he's.
Oh my.
Why is he what?
He's wearing a skirt.
Exactly. All right, so I'm going to tell you this. With both the neck brace and with the outfit, it was considered respectful for men of this social class to dress like the ruler. So if the ruler was a woman, then they might wear something that looked like a dress, and they might wear a collar that looks really feminine. Because that's what you did, is you dressed like your regent. You're like your ruler.
What's on his arm? The collar looks weird with the armor on. It looks really
Yes,
weird.
it's
with that.
Oh, yeah,
it'll
it's
be
terrible.
fancy in battle. It's like
It's terrible. It's just terrible. So, into what powerful position, Megan, do you have this? To what powerful position was the deposed King Ferdinand promoted? He was deposed, he was thrown out, and then he got what job?
got promoted to emperor.
No.
He
got promoted to the Holy Roman Emperor. He got to be the Holy Roman Emperor, which means he got quite an upgrade in his job, being the Holy Roman Emperor.
Wait, so that picture was Ferdinand?
Yes, this is King Ferdinand. The other one was the other guy. All right, so here we start on the rumors, Blythe, that spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire said what about Ferdinand?
That Ferdinand was not going to
He wouldn't be tolerant of Protestants. And so the surrounding countries even though they were not part of the Holy Roman Empire, thought, oh no, we don't want a king like that. Let's go to war. Because that's what they did back in these days. The king of what country, Micah, feared Ferdinand and decided to invade him? Who was the first round of the 30 Years' War? Denmark. So Denmark was first. And then, did the Protestants win or the Catholics win? Catholics. Catholics won. Protestants 0. Ferdinand beat the king of Denmark, which would have been the end of it, but he was like, hey, now that I've beaten you, why don't you also, Ben, do what?
Bananas.
No.
Steal the wealth and property.
Yeah, why don't you give back all the money, all the property? And it was like what happened after World War I. When we penalized Germany for the loss for their loss in World War I, and we ruined their economy so badly that they looked for a savior to save their economy and followed Hitler.
Ew.
So Hitler's rise to power was very much related to the way that we, countries like us, treated Germany after World War I. Yes?
Technically, if you
No one
the
does.
30 Years' War was World War Z.
World War II. That's true. That's true. All right, that was the first round. Second round, Lily. What strong king of what country? There's two things on here. Attacked Ferdinand. Who was it?
Gustavus, the second,
Adolphus of Sweden. So if you didn't put the country, make sure you add that. He has an amazing name, Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden.
He had meatballs.
Yes.
My brother's middle name is Gustavo.
I
We call him
love
Gus
it.
for short.
I love it.
That's my dog's name.
All right, so then the Protestants lost again. It's 2 for the Catholics, 1 for the 0 for the Protestants. And by the end, you have, like we had already talked about, there was an actual Catholic cardinal. You know he's a cardinal because that's what the red hat means. The red outfit, the red hat say, I'm a cardinal. So his name, anybody want to try to pronounce his name, Wesley? Richelieu, Cardinal Richelieu. And he always is, they always say Cardinal Richelieu. They don't just say Richelieu usually because, I don't know, his position's really important. He always looks like this. So now you have Protestants 1, Catholics 2, you're working on all this, and the Cardinal supported the Protestant side because he was trying to keep the Habsburgs from being too strong. Now, when I say Habsburgs, it's a family like the Tudors. The Tudors, the Stuarts, the Habsburgs were a family that ruled the Holy Roman Empire and some other countries in Europe. And much like the Tudors, they intermarried.
No.
They married their own cousins. And what happens when you marry your own cousins a lot? What do you get?
The babies are messed up.
The babies have genetic abnormalities. So the Habsburgs have this very prominent square jaw, big nose, tall forehead. They all do. And that is a result of some genetic abnormalities that came from deciding the only people that were worthy of being married were other people from your own family. Yes. Yes, you can get all sorts of problems from intermarriage,
Don't.
Yeah.
It's illegal.
including just people dying. All right, 3 results. The Calvinists were finally given equal rights. Sweden was given control over some rivers that would let them trade, and France finally got more land. But I told you the main result at the beginning, and that was no more Catholic Protestant wars.
Can we go now?
Fun.
Yep, you can go.
The French people were like, come on.